Okay, so let's talk about grounding. What is grounding? Why do we care? And why does everybody in this field, in the counseling field, always go back to grounding? Because it's everybody. So, why is that the case? Well, put quite simply, you can't do work if you can't ground yourself when things get tough. You can't make progress if you can't return to a peaceful, comfortable space. It's all about regulation. It's all about impulse control. It's all about controlling the emotions instead of the emotions controlling you. Now, there's probably thousands of ways to ground yourself, right? And I don't know them all. I could probably explain the principles that underlie them, at least most of them, but I don't know them all. And you know what? That's okay, because you probably don't want to listen to all of them. I mean, I wouldn't. So, what we're gonna do is I'm gonna give you an idea of what I do when somebody comes into my office for the first time. Right, and I'm gonna speak to you exactly how I speak to them. So let's take that off. And yeah, I know my hair's messy, but whatever. This isn't about, you know, uh, portraying, I don't know, supermodel level imagery. It's about being real. It's about having these discussions because you shouldn't have to pay thousands of dollars to know how to best help yourself. A therapist is still helpful, but at least you will have a place to start, right? So, okay, here it goes. You come in my office. You just sit down, make yourself comfortable. I always ask, so how you doing today? Right. And we talk a little bit. We talk about what's going on. You know, people usually say, oh, I'm good, I'm good. Little busy, but good. And then I'm like, alright, that's great. Glad to hear it. Um, you know, I just want to be totally upfront with you and explain a few things about therapy, especially the first appointment. Um, so how I usually do this is I explain who I am and we just go from there. And so first I would like to share that I am a grad student. I have a concentration in trauma. Um, and I view things from an Adlerian point of view, which is a really fancy way of saying, listen, I have my education in a trauma focused lens, right? When I'm talking to somebody, my brain is going to, you know, conceptualize some of what we talk about in these ways. So, different things that a trauma-informed lens could mean, or a trauma-concentrated approach, um, is I talk a lot about what's going on in your body in the moment, right? And when I say that, I usually am asking, where do you feel these things in your body, right? Is it a tightness in your chest? Do you feel it more in your stomach? Do you feel like you need to get up and run? Like, what is going on for you in the moment when we bring up certain topics? And I don't usually go into too heavy of topics in the first session because it's just about getting to know each other. But yeah, so I usually start with that, and then I also like to ask, what are your goals? What are you hoping for out of therapy? Or what brings you into the office today? And so we talk about that, and maybe the client says, well, I've been struggling with anger, have a little bit of anxiety, and my relationship is just a constant state of fighting. And I'm like, okay, can you tell me more about what you mean by that? When you say fighting, what does fighting look like? And we discussed all of this too, and, I jot it down in my notebook, and, maybe you tell me, I don't know, about an argument you recently had with your wife. Um, Stuff like that. And I look for patterns. I look for, um, you know, how each individual reacted, not out of judgment. I look out of curiosity. I look for these things so that I can understand the dynamics better, right? My job is not to judge, it's to support. And nobody's perfect. So I don't expect them to be. I don't expect them to be perfect at the end of therapy either. Because we're human. Perfection, in my mind, doesn't exist. So we talk about that, and then we talk about, all the confidential stuff and all the basics of counseling, what are your rights? What am I mandated to report? Um, what you can expect, how long these sessions might last. You know, uh, I might ask you about if you have any past experiences with therapy. Because if you have past experiences, one, I'm probably not gonna be as intense. If you already know a lot of these things, it'll just be a gentle reminder. And two, we can talk about what did you like, right? What did the last therapist do for you that you really enjoyed, that you really gravitated towards? And equally important, What did the last therapist do that you hate, that you feel, that was a waste of time, I got nothing out of it. Um, maybe you didn't like him. Why didn't you like him? Um, did he seem insensitive? Was he not direct enough? Were you looking for solutions when he really didn't share any ideas with you? Like, you know, was it a gender thing? Are you more comfortable with a female therapist or a male therapist or a therapist that understands what it's like to live in the communities you live in, meaning like LGBTQ communities, BIPOC communities, things like that. Like, these are important pieces for me to know. So I usually start that way. And then I say, okay, now what I like to do is I like to discuss grounding techniques. So, these are going to help us regulate in times of distress, um, both in and out of therapy. They're going to be useful, right? And so, do you know of any that you've heard of or that you've practiced? And again, it's more of just a discussion. But assuming they say, oh, no, I've never done any grounding techniques. Um, I usually just go over some of the basics. Again, sorry for yawning. Um, but yeah, I usually go over some of the basics and we just talk about, like, um, for me, one of my favorite grounding techniques as a therapist is a breathing technique. Now, I don't like the whole idea of box breathing, and, but I love the idea of like long exhale breathing, which is exactly what it sounds like, and if you look it up, it'll come right up. But I can never remember the numbers, but the idea of this is that you breathe in and then you breathe out longer than you breathed in, right? So I might say, um, breathe in for 3, breathe out for 5. So then I demonstrate. And, try not to yawn because as you can see, when I talk a lot, I tend to yawn. Um, so here's what I do. I want you to get comfortable in your chair. I want you to really ground yourself, sit up, uh, get comfortable, put your feet on the ground, and then I want you to just follow along with me. So, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna inhale for 3, exhale for 5. Ready? Now, sometimes it's a little longer, sometimes it's not quite 5 seconds. Um, the idea of this is when you exhale longer than you inhale, or I guess when you yawn a bunch, that's a joke. When you exhale longer than you inhale, you're actually bringing your heart rate down, right? You're bringing it down. Um, let's say you're anxious. When you're anxious, your heartbeat is quickened. You're sweaty. You're, you got all these racing thoughts. Whatever. All of this stuff. You know what I mean. Um, and so when you do that and you lower your heart rate, your other responses are gonna follow along, right? And so the idea is that if you get anxious, if you get overwhelmed, it'll help you come back to, you know, the room, and it'll help you center yourself, and you will be able to return to a state of homeostasis. Yeah. And so that's what I really like. It works for me. Might not work for you, but try it out. And another one I usually do is um, I can't remember if it's called the hand technique or the 5 finger technique, but essentially it's you know, name 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, 1 thing you can taste. Um, no, I don't really think it matters, like, if it's 5 things you can taste, 3 things you can hear, to whatever, like, you can mix those up all you want, like, it doesn't have to be specifically, you know, 5 things that you hear. Like, it can also be 5 things you touch and 4 things you hear, whatever the case is. The idea here is that it takes you back to focusing on the here and now, focusing on less about the past or what you're recalling or sharing in therapy, and more about what is around me. Like, for me right now, I'm looking around. I see my hat. I see my phone. I see a yoga ball. I see a paper towel. I see a can of WD-40. I hear uh, the sound of cars and wind. I, I hear distant conversation from what I assume is the apartment above me. Um, I can feel the my 2 fingers rubbed together. I can feel the chair underneath me. I can feel the grain on the table in front of me. Things like that. And the idea, again, is just to ground you in the moment. And then what's another one I like? Um, hmm, trying to think of another one that I can like demonstrate, but that's also simple and for you to do out in public. Um, Honestly, I've heard a lot of good things about just visualization, and that's just like what um what is something that makes you comfortable. Tell me about a time in your life when you were happy and content. Now, for some of you, happy and content might mean, you know, um, being around my nephew. Um, he always has the smile on his face when he sees me, and it always brightens my day and makes me feel like, you know, there's still good around us, and I really feel at peace in that moment, right? And so maybe that's something you think about, and it can be anything. I mean, maybe you went to Hawaii for vacation and you had a really nice experience. Um, Maybe there was a spa. I don't know, like what what makes you feel comfortable, content, relaxed. And again, just like with my self-care discussion, this requires practice. It's not going to be something that you have down right away. And if they don't work for you, that's fine, because there's a bunch of other ones. I always tell people what works for me might not work for you. What works for this client might not work for this client. What works for your dad might not work for your mom. That's fine. Completely fine. It's all about what grounds you, what makes you feel content, comfortable, safe, happy, all of these things. And again, if you can figure that out, you're well on your way to being able to have a successful and positive experience with self growth and counseling overall.